So everybody wants to get into filmmaking, videography, cinematography, whatever you want to call it. Everybody gets into it for the glamorous stuff, the music videos, the short films, the feature films if you're lucky. But when you're starting out, that's not how you're gonna make money. Me, for example, my company, 16K Productions, go follow us on Instagram, we specialize in live music videos. But as we're starting out, that doesn't pay the bills at all. In fact, it's pretty close to a least profitable part of the business. So one of the ways in these early days that we've been making money is recording sports games. For us specifically, it's mid-tier Australian rules football. That could be soccer, American football, rugby, basketball even. It could be basically anything, but it is a very good way to actually start making some money really quickly and really easily. However, when I first got my first gig doing these, I had no idea what to do. I'd never recorded a sports game. I'd never set up my camera for recording a sports game. And to be honest, I barely knew the rules of the specific game I was recording. So in this video, I'm going to go through pretty much all of those. How to set up your camera, what settings to use, and how to actually record and edit the game itself. So let's jump up to this camera. So this is everything that you will need to set the camera up in my opinion, the best way possible to record sports games. So the camera I have up first is the Blackmagic 6K Pocket Cinema camera. Sorry about the side camera here. The actual camera I use to record is this one. And there's no real room, you know, because of the massive camera up in the roof. You can pretty much use any camera that you can think of. It's not really imperative that it is this one. What is imperative, however, is the lens. You need a really long lens. So I've got a 90 to 300 millimeter lens. I didn't buy this lens. This was a lens that my grandpa gave me that he just didn't use anymore. And I don't really use long lenses in anything other than sports recording. So I was just like, screw it, it doesn't matter. There is one problem with this lens, but I will tell you that in a later section. But it's not that big of an issue. Then you'll need a mounting system, so railings are really important in this setup. Obviously a plate for your tripod, a V-mount battery, depending on the camera. However, for this setup, it is necessary. A V-mount battery plate, a monitor, a matte box potentially, a focus puller, not for focus pulling, more on that later, and obviously all your cables. So let me show you how this is put together. What makes this much easier is this little small rig tool. Trust me, without this, my life would be a million times harder, and that's an objective fact. So first up, we want to put the plate on. With the mounting plate on, you then want to put the tripod plate on. Now you will need a very good tripod for this. You don't want to be having one of those really flimsy tripods, you know, those first camera tripods that you often see, because you'll be moving around a lot, and you really want a fluid head tripod. I use the small rig tripod. It's pretty cheap for what it is, but it very much gets the job done if you're not wanting to jump up to those literally $3,000 tripods. Cool, so now that the base plates are on, here is what makes my camera setup a little bit different to what you'd probably expecting. So with the battery plate, what you're probably expecting is just to slide it on like that and the battery goes in like that. However, for this build, we're actually sliding it on like this, so the battery is placed on the bottom. So in the end, the battery plate actually ends up sitting like this, right on the bottom, like that. And this is for one very, in my opinion, important reason. When recording sports games, you want to really be into the monitor. So you want to be like proper right in it. And the way I do that is by mounting the monitor onto the battery plate. So we just turn the camera to its side like this, and I grab this little screw here. I just feed that through one of these holes on the bottom of the plate, grab my little small rig tool. Now it is kind of a finicky operation because it's not generally how it's designed to be done. But if you just screw that into the monitor, tighten it up, and there we have it. The monitor is now on the back of the camera. Now we do still have a handle with a monitor mount on it, but that is because I can't be asked to take the monitor mount off. And I still like having a handle on the camera. Now another thing I've done with this camera to make it a bit more user-friendly when it comes to sports recording is to stick the focus wheel onto the zoom. So with all focus wheels, they come with these little straps. Now I've strapped it onto the part of the lens that controls the zoom, which when I stick the focus wheel on, focus wheel now controls zoom in and zoom out, which leads to very smooth zooms, a lot of fast control, so you're not fiddling around when you're filming the sports game. And finally, I do have a matte box. You only really need this in certain situations, and I'll be going through that when I actually head out to a game to film, because if you're filming into the sun, you will need the matte box to stop the light from really just killing your image. However, if you are facing away from the sun, a matte box is not necessary and will actually mess around with your zoom depending on which lens you have. So for now, we're just gonna leave this off. And obviously all that is left is to cable up the rest of the camera. Oh, and obviously the most important part, you will need a storage device that has enough space to record a 2-hour game, depending on which game you're filming. I record on SSDs because I do 6K, pretty low compression. So it takes up about 1 terabyte of storage, a whole game. But depending on which camera you use, that is obviously gonna be different. Cool, so now that the camera is all set up, we are ready to head out.
However, before heading out, a couple things to note. Here is an oval where football is played. Now, choosing a location to set down your camera is pretty important. You don't want to be here, where the sun is going to be shining right into your camera lens, otherwise you'll be creating a bunch of camera flares. You also want to be center of the field, as you want to easily be able to capture both sides of play. If you're favoring one team over the other, that's going to piss some people off. And finally, if you can, you want to make sure you have a height advantage.
I have the high ground!
For you to keep track of the ball. So for this specific field, this is the best place to set up your camera.
Okay, so we have the camera all set up and we're ready to record the game. Except one problem. I never actually got around to recording this video while the season was going on, so there is no game. So let's just pretend there's a sports game behind us and I will show you how to record it. So the settings I use to record the game stay consistent throughout, mostly. So I shoot in 24 frames a second, I have a shutter angle of 180 degrees or a shutter speed of 1/50. My aperture is around f23. One, because it's out in the daylight, so I don't want to overexpose anything. And two, you want to keep everything in focus. So if something's, maybe 100 meters away from you versus 250 meters away from you, it's going to be a different focus. With the high aperture, it allows me to have a lot of things in focus. Even then, some things do get slightly out of focus. This lens actually changes focus as you move in and out, which is not great. But I have to deal with it because I'm not spending, $1,000 on another lens when this is perfectly fine with just a few caveats. The only thing I do change on the constant is the ISO. So being outside, clouds start moving, the sun actually sets. These games take 2 hours. So beginning to end, the lighting situation is going to differ pretty greatly, to be honest. So my ISO is set to this little roller over here on the camera, so that in the middle of the game, I can just quickly change the ISO. Everything else stays the same. If your camera has it, set the ISO to auto. This is more of a cinema camera, so it can't actually do that very well, so I just manually change it. So this is why I stuck the monitor onto the base plate for the V-mount battery, so that when I'm recording the game, I can just be right in here, fully focusing on the game and not having to sort of move my head trying to get over to the top of the camera, just so I can be fully focused within the game. Because it's very important, because when recording the games, if you miss the ball, that's kind of your whole job. Now, it doesn't matter if you miss it sometimes. They're not expecting, a 10-person camera crew going. They're just expecting that you can mostly follow the ball. And that's where the fluid head of the tripod actually comes in handy, because you need a tripod that you're going to be able to move all rotations. Because if you have one of those older tripods, which funnily enough this camera's on so I can actually demonstrate it, that the way it moves left and right is, it's like you're trying to fight against it. That's not going to work. You need something with very easy movement. Additionally to all of that is the focus wheel that zooms in and out. So the difference between zooming in and out with a focus wheel versus just trying to use your hands is in the smooth department. For example, when I'm zooming in and out with the focus wheel, that's what the zoom looks like. However, if I take the focus wheel away and zoom in and out with my hands, you can see that my hand is moving the lens because it's a very light lens. It's not a super high quality lens. It shows in the movement. So that's why I use the focus wheel. I mean, plus it's, a lot easier, especially when you're moving the camera around like that the whole time. And that is generally why I don't like to use the matte boxes while I'm filming the football games, because if I planned it wrong and the sun is going right into the lens and I have the matte box on the front, that's actually going to weigh down the lens. And as I zoom in and out, it's going to have those shakes. I very much use that as a last resort. So when you're filming games, depending on what sport you're filming, you want to be close enough so you can tell what is happening, but you also want to be far enough away that if the ball, gets shot out of the frame, it's not actually that hard to reframe and find the ball. But again, if you lose the ball, if you're too close, if you're too far, if any of that happens, don't worry, seriously. My first game was an absolute travesty and I missed the ball like 80% of the game probably. But you're not a professional camera crew recording these games. You are a one-man band recording a local football game. If you screw up, nobody's gonna get mad at you. I actually don't think that the person who hires me has watched any of the videos that I've made. And to be honest, that's pretty much it when it comes to recording the football games from the actual recording perspective. Let's head back to my office and I will show you how we edit the games together. Okay, so now that we've got our footage, let's head over to Premiere Pro and I'll show you how I cut it all together. So, because in Australian rules football, there is 4 quarters, so I've got 4 files. So just drag them all into the timeline. One by one, because Premiere Pro often just messes around with orders of footage. Now, this is a file that I have pre-set up that I use every single time. So it's got multiple layers. It's got a layer for which quarter is playing. It's got a layer, I just pointed to the screen, I know you can't see where I'm pointing. It's got a layer for the scores. It's got a layer for the names of each team. It's got a layer for the graphic, which is pretty easy to pull together in Photoshop. I just took an official football graphic and redid it with the individual teams. And I have 2 layers of color correction. I shoot in the Blackmagic RAW, so it's all ungraded footage. Depending on what camera you shoot on or how you shoot is to whether you have to do that or not. So I will then drag all of these layers to extend the entire timeline. And because when I record the games, all they're looking for is the scores. They're not actually looking for any of these graphics or anything. If I really wanted to, I could just have it like that. And I wouldn't need the graphics or anything. But I like to do that just because it makes the videos look a little bit more professional. So what I'll do is I'll just run through the footage, find out where they score. Cool, so right here, they score there. I wait for the linesman to mark the goal. And right there, I will cut. I will skip to where they start play again, which is right here. Right here. And I have pre-made graphics that I will then chuck onto, goal. So I just chuck that on in between that cut. And resize it. So this is what's called a stinger. So this will play just as he's saying that there was a goal, and by the time it comes back, we're back into play. So I made these in After Effects. They are very, very simple to create. I can do a separate tutorial on it if you'd like. It's just a little bit much for this singular video. Otherwise, you can definitely find other tutorials online for it. So I have these stingers for 6 things in the games. So I have a stinger for end of time, so the game's finished. And I have a stinger for every quarter. So first quarter, second quarter, etc., etc. Oh, and I have to, type in that they scored. So 6 points to them. That's just how Australian rules football works. And once that's all done, I've gone through and scored every goal, put all the stingers in, and done all the graphics. Honestly, from importing the footage to exporting the finished game, it takes about 45 minutes to 50 minutes to do that because you get pretty quick at doing it and being able to see when the goals take place and everything. If you're required to do more for your editing, like if they want, specific graphics for player stats or fouls, penalties, all that sort of stuff, that might be slightly different, but this is the basics of how to edit a finished sports game. I say sports game because it can apply to, rugby, soccer, everything I said at the beginning. And guys, so I was going to swing round to, the set that I was on right at the beginning of the video, but I forgot to record it before I packed the whole thing down. So you just got this random camera angle of my bookshelf. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate all the support I've been getting on this channel lately. If you were interested and you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and follow me on Instagram. That really shows me that you like the content and want to see more. Yeah, if you have any questions, just put them down in the comments and I will see you guys in whatever video I decide to do next. Alright, bye guys. Can I just say, this is the first time I've done a top-down shot, and this is kind of sketching me out because that camera is being held up just by that, and yeah, I don't know. It's safe. But because it's the first time I've ever done it, it is kind of sketchy.